Hi, I'm Lynda Norman. I'm a watercolor artist in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. Today, we're going to further our adventures with watercolor straight from the tube on canvas. It's a technique that I really love. It's something that gives you the freedom to just let the paints and the water move as they will with little direction from you. The last video I did, I spent a bit more time fine-tuning with a brush at the end. Today, we're not going to do that. We're just going to work straight from the tube and let the water and the pigment dance and do their magic. I'd also like to show you today more of a monochromatic view. So we're going to use, this is Sepia and Payne's gray. I like the dark misty tones that they provide. Again, I'm using watercolor by Daniel Smith, Fine Watercolors. Their pigments are beautiful, rich, textured, granulating. They have a magic all of their own built right into the tubes, I'm sure. And it's just such a beautiful product to work with. But whatever you're using, give it a try. The rich pigment, the thickness of the paint straight from the tube is just a joy to work with. So we'll start with just a regular canvas. You can use any canvas you like. This one I think came from a dollar store. You can get them from your local art supply or online. This is a thin one. I very often will use a gallery wrap, a deeper canvas. It's a bit thicker. They have less chance of twisting and warping, I find. But these little ones are really great to work with and have some fun with. Most canvases that you buy that come on a little frame, like this one, stapled, already have a pre-treatment. So they've been gessoed and at least with one coat. I never put anything else on the canvas. I just leave them as they are. If you choose to put anything on a gesso or an acrylic medium or anything like that, you'll get different results. And by all means, experiment with that if that's something you'd like to try out. I prefer just to use the paints and the pigments and the water straight to the canvas. So I'm going to just randomly wet the canvas. This technique is really most suitable for landscapes. And I like a rectangular shaped canvas. I'm using a watercolor brush that holds a lot of water. And I will get as much of it on the surface of the canvas as I can. I like to leave a strip here and there, so probably one about maybe, this looks like a little bit lower than a third, or about a third of the way down, and then a little bit on the bottom and some places at the top. That way, the pigments, when they touch the canvas, leave a bit of a texture rather than a flowy effect that they would have as they touch the water. Oh, and I should mention too, I picked this up, it's a spoon rest, but I'm finding it really handy to keep my brushes on, so that's something to consider. We don't ever want to store our wet brushes this way because the water can run into the ferrule and we don't want to loosen that glue and whatever's holding them together. Our brushes, especially our favorite ones, are pretty precious and we really don't want to damage them. So I've put Sepia and Payne's gray on my surface. This is a piece of photocopy or photo paper. And you can buy that in bulk anywhere. I like it because it doesn't allow the water or the pigment or anything to soak through. And I would use the back of it. The front part, where the shiny part where your photos would end up if you're printing your own photos, has an emulsion and you don't want that mixing in with your paint. So I've added a dab of each, put water on my canvas, picked up a credit card. There's lots of kinds. I like to start with one with a bit of a rounded edge. Sometimes the ones with squarer edges can leave a harsher mark on your surface. I'm going to pick up the, I'm just going to turn this because, of course, I put the brown on first and the sepia on first and then the gray, and I would like my gray to be more on top. And this is going to be quite simple, so I've picked up my pigment. And I, again, don't want anything dead center, so I'm going to start just up a little bit. And now that I've got my first line on, I can go in and add just a little bit more. And then a bit for a cloudy effect up on the top. Now you can see in the center where I did not put any water has left kind of a beautiful texture. A tiny bit of pigment has touched the surface of the canvas, and I'm not pressing hard. I don't want to scratch my canvas. I don't want to cause scrape marks. And I'm just going to maneuver and encourage the paint, the pigment, to just flow a little, whoops, a little bit. And if you let it tip and run, and you can pick up a tiny bit from the surface. If you can see you've got thicker areas, and pick it up with the edge of your credit card. And I'm just going to bring a bit more in for a bit more cloud in the sky. And we just tip it and let it run. Some people like to use a hairdryer. I prefer not to. I find very often it's a bit hard to control with a hairdryer, and you will end up pushing your paints and pigment in a direction that you hadn't really intended. So I will just slightly adjust things with my credit card and let things run a tiny bit. And pretty much, there you have it. That looks like it needs to come down a slight bit. Some wispy clouds happening up top. A little bit of mountainscape happening down here. A little lake there. Maybe a bit more of a lake in this area near the bottom. And there's a hair on there. Of course there is. Usually, if you have patience, if you just let it dry, you can pick the hair off. I'm not that patient person. But I think in this case it's going to have to stay there. So pretty much, that's it. It's painted itself. I love the two tones. I love the texture, the blending of the darker colors, the shadows. And I love that in just a few short minutes I have a landscape that I'm pretty happy with. Now I can leave it until it's dry, and the more I tip it, the more it's going to run. So I'm just going to get my handy dandy brush because I don't really want those runs in there. But maybe some of them should come down further. Okay. Oops. Now this is the point where, like I say, you do just want to let it dry. There we And it's going to continue to run as long as it's wet. Now this area here where it dripped down a tiny bit, I said we weren't going to use a brush, but I'm going to just go in there and move that around a tiny bit. Just to pull some of that out, bring in a bit of shadow. Okay. If there's areas that are really wet and pooling, you can certainly dab them out. And here's where you get a lot of your misty shadows. So again, paper towel rounded, balled up and rounded. And just a light touch, and you can shape some of those later areas, bring in some mist. Some of you have asked about the thickness of the pigment, and yes, if you've put it on really thick and haven't let the moisture or the water smooth it out, over time that will crack. As the water dries and as the binder in the paints dry, there could be some crackling at the end. And so what I do for all my paintings, and canvas is no exception, is when they're dry, I usually give a couple of light coats with something called Camar varnish. It's a Krylon product. Whatever part of the world you're in, I'm sure there's an equivalent if you can't access these. So a couple of light coats of this once things are dry, and then a couple of finishing coats of a UV resistant. And again, I use the Krylon products because that's what's available here in British Columbia for me. And that will help preserve your pigment. It will keep things, if they do tend to crack, because air will come through the back of the canvas because it's porous. So eventually the pigments, if they are very thick, will crackle. But if you treat them with several coats of spray varnish, I found over the years that's quite adequate. And it also makes the finished painting really, really easy to care for. You can use a damp cloth and dust it off. So there's no need to frame it with glass or do anything else to preserve that. Okay. Now I see, and I don't know if it's quite dry enough or not, but I see that there is a round dot, so a little splotch of water, or perhaps this canvas had a little spot of oil on it. So I'm going to, I'm a big fan of moons, and so I'm going to take a little bottle and just wrap it tightly with some paper towel. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but that little dot there. And I'm just going to make that circle. Oop. And then I can go in and make that a little more rounded. And then, if you were to turn while it's still a bit damp, the water and the pigment will flow into that little circle and make it a bit more misty. You can also take a dry brush and just encourage your pigments sort of through, so you have a bit of a hazy moon in there. People have also asked about finishing them and framing them once you've painted on a canvas like this. And similar to any other painting on a canvas, you can wrap your paint around the edges, and also you can set them into a floater frame. So as the paints and the water continue to dry, they're going to move a bit on the page. But I love the looseness of it. I love the organic nature. And I'm just, if I see a harsh edge and it bothers me, then I can go in with a dry brush and just smooth a few edges here and there. I like how this looks. I will leave it. I think it's a beautiful little example of an abstract watercolor. And again, in a matter of just a few moments. If at any point before you seal it, you decide you want to fine tune it, you can certainly do that. And you can just go in with, after it's dry, go in with one of these, usually an acrylic brush with a firmer edge on it. Is really handy to do. While it's still wet, not as effective because the moisture, the water and the pigment will continue to move. I like to wait till it's dry, and then I put in a couple of defining lines for shorelines. But for all intents and purposes, I can see my little moon here is still a bit wonky. Just round that off a little bit and give it a few more edges. And that is that. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you've seen here, you can subscribe to my channel, or you can find me on my website, bandrystudio.com. That's BANDRAOI studio.com.